There is a word in international law called perfidy. It means pretending to negotiate in good faith while secretly preparing to fight. It is considered one of the most serious violations a state can commit. And I want to use that word carefully today because I think what is happening right now in the Strait of Hormuz is the closest thing to that concept that we have seen in modern American foreign policy. Here are the facts as they stand right now. On April 8th, the United States and Iran signed a 2-week ceasefire, a formal agreement mediated by Pakistan, announced by Trump on Truth Social, confirmed by Iran's foreign minister. The terms were clear. Stop fighting. Use the 2 weeks to negotiate a permanent solution. The ceasefire runs until April 22nd. That ceasefire is still technically in effect as I record this. And inside that ceasefire, while both sides are legally bound to stand down, Trump told the New York Post that the United States Navy is being restocked with ammunition. The Wall Street Journal reported that Trump is actively considering limited military strikes on Iran. CENTCOM announced a naval blockade starting at 10 a.m. today. And the IRGC responded by saying any military vessel approaching Hormuz will be treated as a ceasefire violation and dealt with severely. So let me ask you a very simple question. What exactly is a ceasefire if one side is reloading its weapons inside it? I want to think about this carefully with you because I do not think the answer is as simple as it looks. There is a version of this where what America is doing is rational and strategically coherent, and there is another version where what America is doing is one of the most self-defeating moves in the history of its diplomacy. I want to walk through both honestly before I tell you which one I think is actually happening. Let me start with the version where America's behavior makes sense. The argument goes like this. Iran has been using the ceasefire strategically. Iran signed the ceasefire because it needed time to regroup. Iran's military took serious damage in 40 days of strikes. Its air defense systems were degraded. Its command and control structures were disrupted. The ceasefire gave Iran breathing room to consolidate, to reposition, to bring IRGC commanders into Pakistan for consultations, to rebuild the strategic picture. From this perspective, America restocking its Navy is not a violation of the ceasefire spirit. It is matching Iran's behavior. If Iran is using the pause to strengthen its position, America would be foolish not to do the same. The ceasefire is a tactical pause, not a transformation of intentions. Both sides know this. Both sides are preparing for the next phase. America is just being more transparent about it. There is logic in that argument. I want to be fair to it. But here is where the logic breaks down, and this is the part I think most analysts are missing. The entire strategic value of the Islamabad talks, the entire reason Pakistan spent 3 weeks building that framework, the entire reason the ceasefire was agreed to in the first place, was to create conditions where a permanent deal became possible. The theory was simple. Stop the fighting, create space, use the space to negotiate. Let both sides feel that the other is serious about a political solution. Build enough trust that the final deal becomes reachable. That theory required something very specific. It required both sides to behave as if they actually wanted a deal, not just to say they wanted a deal, to behave as if they did, because trust is not built through statements. Trust is built through actions, and actions that are inconsistent with wanting a deal destroy trust faster than any statement can rebuild it. Now ask yourself what signal it sends to Iran when America, on the very day the Islamabad talks collapse, announces both a blockade and the restocking of its navy with ammunition. The signal is not complicated. The signal is we were never serious about a deal. The blockade and the ammunition were always the plan. The talks were pressure tactics, not genuine diplomacy. We used the talks to demonstrate to the world that we tried, and now we are going to do what we were going to do anyway. Iran's foreign minister Arakchi said exactly this. He used the word maximalism. He said they encountered shifting goalposts. He said the Islamabad MOU was inches away, and then the American position shifted at the last moment. And now, within 24 hours of those talks failing, a blockade has started and the Navy is loading weapons. If you were sitting in Tehran right now, what conclusion would you draw about the next round of negotiations? You would draw the same conclusion that Iran drew after the first nuclear deal was abandoned in 2018, that American commitments are not reliable, that any agreement you reach can be revoked the moment domestic political winds change, that the only leverage you have is the leverage you hold physically, in the water, in the mines, in the missiles. Because paper agreements with America have an expiry date that America sets unilaterally. And this is the core strategic problem. America's behavior inside the ceasefire is not just tactically questionable, it is structurally counterproductive, because every action America takes that validates Iran's belief that negotiations are pointless makes the next negotiation harder, not easier. Harder. Let me introduce a concept I find very useful for understanding the situation. I call it the trust debt problem. In any negotiation, trust is the currency. You spend trust when you make demands. You earn trust when you keep commitments. When you have more trust than debt, negotiations are possible. When your debt exceeds your trust, negotiations break down regardless of what each side is offering on paper. America walked into Islamabad with a significant trust deficit already. The JCPOA, the 2018 withdrawal from a deal Iran was complying with. Multiple instances of negotiations being described as making progress, then collapsing when American demands escalated. Iran's parliament speaker said it directly in Islamabad. The United States failed to gain the trust of the Iranian delegation. Trust, not agreement on terms, trust. And now, inside the ceasefire that was supposed to be the foundation for the next round of trust building, America has launched a blockade and is restocking its weapons. What does that do to the trust debt? It makes the debt larger. It makes the next negotiation harder to start. It gives Iran's domestic hardliners more ammunition to argue that the moderates who wanted to talk were naive. It strengthens the position of people inside Iran who say America will never negotiate in good faith and that the only language it respects is force. This is the structural damage, not the tactical situation today. The structural damage to the possibility of any negotiated solution in the future. Before I get to what is happening right now in the past 24 hours, I want to give you a historical parallel that I think makes the trust debt problem visible in a way that abstractions cannot. In 1973, the United States and North Vietnam signed the Paris Peace Accords, a formal ceasefire. Both sides committed to it. The world celebrated. Henry Kissinger won the Nobel Peace Prize. And within months, both sides were violating the agreement. America was conducting secret bombing campaigns. North Vietnam was moving troops. The peace agreement lasted on paper for about 2 years before the final collapse. But here is the thing about the Paris Peace Accords that most people do not discuss. The agreement failed not primarily because of military violations. It failed because neither side believed the other was serious. The trust deficit was so large that both sides treated the agreement as a temporary tactical pause rather than a genuine commitment to peace. And when you treat a ceasefire as a tactical pause, you behave inside it accordingly. You restock, you reposition, you prepare, and the other side sees you doing this and does the same. And the ceasefire becomes a countdown to the next round of fighting, rather than a foundation for the next round of talking. Does that pattern sound familiar? Because it is exactly what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz right now. America treating the ceasefire as a tactical pause, restocking weapons, announcing a blockade, considering strikes. Iran watching this and concluding correctly that the ceasefire is not a genuine commitment, but a performance for international audiences while both sides prepare for what comes next. The Paris Peace Accords lasted 2 years in that degraded state. The Hormuz ceasefire has been in effect for 5 days, and America has already launched a blockade inside it. The degradation is happening faster, the trust debt is accumulating faster, and the window for a genuine political solution is closing faster than almost any comparable situation in recent history. There is another parallel I want to draw, more recent and more precise. In 2015, the JCPOA was signed. Iran agreed to limit enrichment to 3.67%. Iran agreed to reduce its stockpile by 98%. International inspectors went in. The IAEA confirmed Iran was complying. For 3 years, the deal worked. The enrichment was low, the stockpile was small, the nuclear threat was contained. Then in 2018, America withdrew. Not because Iran violated the deal, because the American domestic political situation changed, because a new administration decided the deal was insufficient, because forces inside Washington that had always opposed any accommodation with Iran got what they wanted. And what happened after America withdrew? Iran's enrichment went from 3.67% to 60%, from well below weapons grade to approaching it. The stockpile that had been reduced by 98% was rebuilt and then expanded far beyond pre-deal levels. The inspectors lost access. The The nuclear timeline that the deal had extended to more than a year collapsed to weeks. The policy that was supposed to weaken Iran's nuclear program produced the exact opposite result. Iran's nuclear program is more advanced today than it has ever been in its entire history, not despite American pressure, because of it. And now America is back at the table demanding that Iran give up enrichment entirely, not reduce it, not limit it, give it up completely, permanently, after spending 6 years demonstrating that American commitments are conditional and revocable and dependent on whoever happens to be in the Oval Office. Why would any Iranian negotiator agree to permanently dismantle their nuclear infrastructure in exchange for a commitment from a country that has shown twice that it will abandon those commitments when the domestic politics shift? The trust debt from 2018 is still outstanding, and every action inside this ceasefire that looks like America preparing for the next military phase rather than the next diplomatic phase makes that debt larger. Now, I want to connect this to something that happened in the past 24 hours that I think most people have not fully processed. The Pope is on a plane to Algeria right now. The first American Pope in history is flying to a Muslim country in Africa while America bombs a Muslim country in the Middle East. And Trump called him weak and terrible for foreign policy. I am not going to make this about religion. I want to make this about what it reveals structurally about America's position in the world right now. The Pope said something that I think is the most precise description of what America is doing inside this ceasefire. He called it a delusion of omnipotence. Let me stay with that phrase for a moment because I think it is exactly right. A delusion of omnipotence is when you believe that your power is so absolute that normal constraints do not apply to you, that you can sign a ceasefire and restock your weapons simultaneously and face no consequences, that you can launch a blockade and still call yourself the honest broker, that you can say other countries will join this blockade while no ally confirms it, that you can tell reporters you are considering strikes inside a ceasefire and expect Iran to stay at the table. This is not strength. This is a category error about what strength actually means at this stage of American power. Let me show you the evidence that this is a delusion and not a reality. The UK said it will not join the blockade. Keir Starmer said explicitly, "We are not getting dragged in." Britain, America's closest ally, the country that was supposedly sending minesweepers, publicly refused. Australia said it received no requests from America to join the blockade. Trump announced that other countries would be involved. Australia said, "Nobody called us." France and Britain are now organizing their own separate conference to reopen Hormuz without American leadership. Not with America, without America leading it. Two of America's most important NATO allies are building an alternative framework because they do not trust America's framework. Germany's chancellor went on camera and said the Iran war is the root cause of the problems in his own country. And then Germany slashed its fuel taxes because its economy is being crushed by a war it had no role in starting. This is not the picture of omnipotence. This is the picture of a country that started a war, found it harder than expected to finish it, tried diplomacy, and found it harder than expected to deliver a deal, and is now escalating in ways that are driving its own allies away. And into this vacuum, very predictably, other actors are moving. China is deepening its relationship with Iran. CNN reported that China is preparing new air defense systems for Iran. America's Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed publicly that he knows what China and Russia are doing in the Strait of Hormuz. He did not say he could stop it. He said he knows about it. Iran's Foreign Minister Araghchi, the moment he left Islamabad, began organizing meetings in Berlin, Paris, and London. Iran is going to Europe. Iran is bypassing Washington. Iran is looking for a diplomatic track that does not depend on American good faith because Iran has concluded that American good faith in this negotiation is not available. And Russia made a quiet statement during the Islamabad talks saying it had concerns that forces may be attempting to obstruct the peace process. Russia named nobody, but Russia was pointing at something. And the thing Russia was pointing at was visible to anyone paying attention. Now let me bring this back to the central question. What does it mean that America signed a ceasefire and is now reloading its weapons inside it? It means one of two things. Either this is a deliberate strategy or it is a loss of control. The deliberate strategy version says America is using the ceasefire as cover to resupply and reposition. America intends to resume hostilities once it is ready. The talks in Islamabad were theater. The real plan has always been continued military pressure until Iran either collapses or concedes completely. The loss of control version says Trump announced a ceasefire, and then the hardliners inside his administration, the people who want maximum pressure, the people who designed the maximalist nuclear demands that broke the Islamabad talks, those people are now driving the operational decisions. The blockade, the ammunition restocking, the talk of strikes inside the ceasefire. And Trump is either directing this or being carried by it. Both of these versions have the same practical consequence. The ceasefire is being hollowed out. The trust required for a deal is being destroyed. The allies who might have supported a diplomatic solution are being pushed away. And Iran's conclusion that only physical leverage matters is being validated. Here is the specific number I want you to hold in your mind. 9 days. The ceasefire runs until April 22nd. That is 9 days from today. In 9 days, either a new framework for talks is agreed or the ceasefire expires and both sides are legally free to resume hostilities. 9 days. And in those 9 days, America has launched a blockade. America is restocking its weapons. America is considering strikes inside the ceasefire. America's allies are refusing to join the blockade. Iran is calling the blockade piracy. Iran is talking to Europe. Iran is calling Saudi Arabia. China is preparing weapons for Iran. The Pope is calling it a delusion of omnipotence. What does this situation look like on day 10? America signed a ceasefire with Iran and is now reloading its weapons inside it. And before I close, I want to say one more thing about the Pope, not about religion, about what his response to Trump reveals about the global audience watching this war. Trump called the Pope weak and terrible for foreign policy. The Pope said he has no fear of the Trump administration. The Vatican official said Trump attacks the Pope because he cannot contain him. The Pope is now flying to Algeria, a Muslim country, to carry a message of peace while America is loading weapons inside a ceasefire. The contrast is not subtle. Not. And the global audience, the 1.4 billion Catholics, the billions of Muslims watching an American Pope go to an African Muslim country while an American president loads weapons for a Middle Eastern war, that audience is making its own judgments. Not about theology, about moral authority, about who in this situation represents something worth following. America's power in the world has always rested on two pillars: military force and moral authority. The belief, however imperfect, that America stood for something beyond its own interests. That it was, as Madeleine Albright once said, the indispensable nation. The country that others look to, the blockade, the ammunition restocking, the consideration of strikes inside a ceasefire, the attack on the Pope for calling for peace. None of these actions strengthen the military pillar. Iran's mines are still in the water, the strait is still contested. No ally confirmed joining the blockade, and every one of these actions weakens the moral authority pillar, because the moral authority pillar requires that America behave in ways that justify the trust others place in it. A country that signs a ceasefire and reloads its weapons inside it is not building that trust. It is spending it. And unlike ammunition, moral authority cannot simply be restocked by placing an order with a defense contractor. Think about that very carefully. Think about what it means for the 9 days ahead. Think about what it means for any country that signs a future agreement with America. Think about what it means for the next war, wherever that is.